Welcome to the Rich Dad Stockcast. I'm your host, Denney, and today we're diving into something that separates the top 1% investors from everyone else. It's not just what they invest in, it's how they think while they invest. We're talking about trading psychology and discipline. This isn't theory. This is what actually drives results in the market. You can know every chart, every ratio, every strategy, but if your mindset isn't right, you'll sabotage yourself before you even begin. Joining me today is Rich Dad expert Andy Tanner, a master teacher when it comes to both the technical and the mental side of investing. Now, before we jump in, don't forget to visit stockcastbonus.com. We've put together free tools and trainings to help you develop the mindset and the skill set of a real investor. Again, that's stockcastbonus.com. Now, let's get into it. Andy, welcome back to the show.
Oh, this is such a great topic, Del. This one is, it's a big deal. You mentioned the topic, and I had to run a little search for a couple of things on my computer because I've actually been studying this quite a bit. So this will be really cool.
You're always such a guide in these things, so I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this. But you've also put together a lot of information, a lot of resources for us at stockcastbonus.com. Tell us, what do listeners receive when they go to stockcastbonus.com?
Well, first of all, free things, valuable things, but they're free. They're yours. Your name is on it. They're there for the taking. We have downloads. We have classes. We have really cool stuff. Get the free stuff first for sure, and start there. We love free. When you talk about investing, there's very few things you can do without any risk. Right? You buy some real estate, you got to manage risk. You buy some stocks, you got to manage risk. But you get an opportunity to learn at stockcastbonus.com in a very organized, systemized way. And it's really about habits. That's where people go. It says, I love learning a lot, but I really like better habits. Get that download. There's a free ebook there in particular. Get that download. I've had more students start there and report kind of a catapult experience where it really got them going and on track. So make sure you get there and get those free resources so you can develop habits. Habits make money. Education makes money. Habits are where education is applied. So, and that fits our topic today of mindset psychology. I've got some great stuff. I study it all the time. So, we'll hop into that.
So now most people think, success in the stock market is about having the right pick or the perfect timing. Everyone's always aiming for perfect timing, but the top percent know better. Um, why is trading psychology so critical, especially when emotions are running high?
I have two podcasts that we do. We do the Stockcast, where it's the more uncomfortable of the two for me because you interview me weekly and you pull out what I think I've learned so far. And really, that's just an amalgamation of what I've learned from other people. I'm just translating we did a podcast just on Robert. What did you learn from Robert and Kiyosaki, Andy? What did you learn from Kim Kiyosaki? And I said, this is what I learned from. My other podcast, the Cashflow Academy, shows the opposite. I interview other people and also my team. And I'm a learner in my other podcast. So why do I have two? Well, in one, it's an opportunity to share what I think I've learned so far. And the other, it's an opportunity for me to learn. I fought the podcast world with tooth and nail. The co-founder of the Cashflow Academy, Mike Dennison, he says, Andy, you got to do a podcast. And I says, that's another thing to think about, another thing to prepare for, another thing to manage. Why? He says, just trust me. It's one of the best counsels I've ever had. I'll give you an example. Last week, Angus Fletcher from Ohio State comes on. And I've had a chance to interview PhDs, guys that are consultants for the International Monetary Fund. People like that, people in the Treasury, people that worked at the Fed. It's just people on the inside. The learning has been incredible. Well, one of the things that people find interesting, especially in my own personal circle, they say, Andy, what's up? What's good? I say, well, I had an interesting interview with, for example, last week with Professor Angus Fletcher. Well, who's Angus Fletcher? Well, he wrote a book called Primal Intelligence. And I've learned the ability to interview guys that I never would have talked to without a podcast. I mean, I can't get into Duke University's business school or, Cal or MIT for that matter. Some of the best business schools, Wharton, and these guys teach me. It's absolutely phenomenal. One of the things people are surprised at when they say what's good, they go, "Why do you have people like Tally Sherritt, neuroscientists, psychologists on your podcast so much?" It's almost a greater amount than finance people or investing people or economists. Why so many neuroscientists? Well, if you look at the options market, Dell, and you go back and try to find the first person that ever sold a contract because of its intrinsic value, there's probably an example before him, but in recorded history, it's widely agreed that it was Thales of Miletus, the first of the great Greek sages. He was a philosopher, and people would make fun of him because you walk around in the big columns, the big marble columns, philosophizing. And they go, "Why don't you go make some money?" Well, he was also a bit of an astronomer, and he predicted an eclipse one time. That impressed some people, and he would also predict weather and seasons. I think he probably got lucky on this one, but he thought he was right. And, even a broken clock's right twice a day. But he predicted a bumper crop of olives. So he went out and he got leases on all the olive presses, just tied them up. And when the bumper crop came in and people wanted to make olive oil, they had to go to him. And the intrinsic value of those contracts went through the roof. So he's the first option guy. But he's also one of the great Greek sages, and this is a very long-winded way of getting to a very important place. His quote as a sage that's engraved in stone that's lasts for 1,000 years here, more than 1,000 years, is "Know thyself." That's really important. That's an invitation and a warning at the same time. Know thyself. The reason psychology is so critical is it is your brain that is the machine that makes the decisions that make you rich or poor. Let me say that again. It is your brain that you're going to rely on to make the decisions that make you rich or poor. Well, our brains aren't perfect. Our brains don't transduce reality very well. We see part of the world, but we don't see the microbes on the sponge. We don't see infrared, and we don't see different types of spectrum. Right? We need night vision goggles and telescopes to really see what's in the world, what's really up. And our brains do not always process things. We also have a lizard brain that makes us fearful and lazy and greedy and nutty. And if there's an old saying that says when emotion goes up, intelligence goes down. And humans are emotional creatures. Just look at some of the things that have happened in this country. Those are driven not by intelligence and saying, well, this makes a lot of sense to do. Most of the division in our country doesn't make a lot of sense. It's emotional. And people tend to react as they would using taste buds instead of brain cells. What do I mean by that? Well, someone says something and it offends someone, and they see two sides of a coin, or they only see one side of a coin that has two sides. So they're both right. One guy says, "This coin says heads," and I know that's true. The other says, "You're out of your mind. It says tails. It's a tails coin." And actually, in a lot of ways, they're both right. They just haven't come together to come to the edge and intellectually acknowledge the truth about both sides and where both sides are right. It's more of someone said something and that offended me, or they have this philosophy and I don't like how it tastes for me. I don't like how it tastes, so they're evil and awful and wrong. And that thinking is just insane. It's nutty. So knowing thyself is why I have so many neuroscientists on, because I need to know how my machinery works. I need to know how my decisions can be tainted, influenced, because I cannot invest and live my life as a taste bud where, oh, this is ice cream. This must be good. I do enough of that in my life already. Oh, this is broccoli. This must be bad because of how it tastes. Oh, this spinach over here. I have a green shake, and it's not a milkshake. It's a green shake. It's filled with spinach, filled with blueberries and protein powders and all this. My wife puts these vitamins out for me. I don't know what they are. She just puts them out, and I take them. They're not the favorite part of my meal. Now a burger, baby, with maybe a fried onion ring on it or maybe a little Ben and Jerry. If I lived my life according to what tasted good, which is really to say what feels good, because that's all it is. It's a sense, it's a feeling, like touch, right? If I make my decisions based on those primal things, that's rough. That's really rough. I want to know myself, thalassemalitis, and that means neuroscience, psychology, learning how our machinery works. That's long-winded, but that's why psychology and training psychology separates, as you said, that 1% from everybody else, because we're going to know ourselves, and we're going to shed that lizard brain as much as we can, or at least acknowledge it's there, and we have emotional awareness, like, oh, my lizard brain's starting to work up here. That's huge. I'll let you comment so I don't say every word on the podcast, but you can tell I feel strongly about this, and that it's had an impact in my life.
Very much so. That's one thing I've learned over the years is just how important mindset is to success. I think Tony Robbins said, 80% of success is mindset, 20% is mechanics. But going back to the lizard brain, what would you say are the biggest psychological traps that investors fall into in the market?
Let me begin with a metaphor before we even go that far. There's the step of self-awareness that is really important in knowing thyself. So maybe a metaphor to kind of land that plane first, if we may. When I was in college, my parents they gave me a beat up car. I'd bought one for myself as a teenager. I had a kind of a fast Chevy, and I totaled it. I fell asleep in it and totaled my car. So now I'm at college, and I'm back on my 10 speed, trying to make things happen. So my grandmother had given my father an old 1968 Dodge Dart, and it wasn't running. It was, rusting out. And my dad gives me this car. He says, you take the Dart, see if you can get it going, and take the Dart. So they got it going, and they gave me that wonderful gift. It had a 3-on-the-tree transmission. And so it had reverse, first, second, and third on the tree, just little H, very simple. 4 gears, 3 forward, 1 backward, slant 6. One day I'm driving in, it jams. When I go from first to second, it jams. And so I don't know much about cars, but I'd worked on them a little bit. Back then, teenagers, you could work on your car. It wasn't computerized. So I popped the hood, and there's linkage, set of rods and pins that link the gear shift to the transmission, and it's a rods and pins. And I see that it's jammed. So I force it back, and, my gear shift works again. And I began to realize the wearing of those rods, pins, and knobs, and bearings, the wearing of them made it stick. Well, because I knew that, I realized that when I'd go from first to second, if I placed a little bit of tension towards myself and just ease that up, it would shift, it would work. That's really important, because I knew the flaw in my machinery, because I was humble enough to look under the hood and know my car, because I understood where this is something that wasn't working optimally. It helped me navigate and still get to where I wanted to go. Well, it's important to look under the hood of our mind and know the flaws in our machinery, where we inherently as human beings don't always perceive things the way they should be. And we, emotions are interesting things. If you look at the fever pitch in our country, most of it's on anger, and it's emotion driven. People are feeling emotions. So that idea of what's under your hood, what it takes humility to think veridically. Rhetoric's more about creating a narrative that fits your feelings. It's creativity and adaptability. That's rhetorical speech. Veridical speech, where you're looking for veracity, is about courage and humility. The humility to acknowledge I might not know everything about myself or the world, know myself, and then know the world. That's what it is. Now, when you talk about specifics, fear and greed are really important emotions. That's really important psychology to understand what fear is and what greed is, or what rather panic might be, because that's how you get rich. Those two emotions, the more you can understand those, and you think, well, there's only two. I know what fear is. I know what greed is. No, 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 no. Knowing how to deal with them and wrestle with them. It's one thing to say, yeah, Michael Jordan's a great basketball player. It's another thing to have to play one-on-one with him and beat him. It's another thing. So when I say, oh, I know what fear is, I know what greed is, yeah, but can you wrestle with them? And can you win that wrestling match? And that specifically, those two, there's others. Oh, there's other things going on in our noggin, but those two, the ability of Warren Buffett and the late Charlie Munger to master, absolutely master those two, overshadows. I'll tell you what overshadows. Their intellect and their brilliance is unquestioned, but often their intellect and brilliance is so bright of a light that it outshines or eclipses their temperament and their mastery of the psychology of fear and greed. They've mastered those things.
That's huge right there. That's a mic drop moment. Just think that what a gem of just knowing like you're aware of anger, you're aware of greed, but can you wrestle with it and can you win? It's such a great way of thinking. Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. Powerful insights so far.
Yeah.
Listeners, if you've ever doubted yourself as an investor, just know, the pros deal with the same emotions. The difference is they've trained their minds to handle it. So when we come back, Amy's going to walk us through practical ways to build mental toughness, discipline, and confidence in your investing, no matter what your experience level is. And make sure you go to stockcastbonus.com right now. We've got free trainings and tools to help you apply everything that we're talking about today. Stick around. We'll be right back.
So far, it's been great. I needed a source where I could really enrich my education through stocks. I didn't really have an avenue for it, and it's helped me a lot. The simplicity has really gotten me on the track to where I enjoy the learning as well as it's really solidifying in my mind. And like, they're not just trying to sell you something, they really care about the people that are in the course, and they really do care about you and your personal goals, and what you want to do is to help you and your family and whatever your goals are in life through that. So it's really been great.
Welcome back to Rich Dad Stockcast. We're talking with Andy Tanner about trading psychology and the mental game of investing. Now let's shift gears into solutions now. So Andy, how do we train our minds like the top 1%?
Well, I would say this is a interesting take on it, perhaps, and people might not realize this. It is so important to have mentors and coaches. And I'll tell you why. Mentors and coaches aren't feeling what you're feeling. So I have a friend that I don't like. He's my best friend from high school, and I don't like him at all because he became an exercise physiologist, and he became really good in his field. He trained a lot of pro athletes, a lot of celebrities. He lives in Utah here. Trains guys like Donny Osmond and guys like that, and jazz players. And he's retired from that now. But I go up and down in my weight. I'll get up and then I'll lose, and I roller coasters, just how I've done it. So I decided to get on a kick, and I did the worst thing I could have done. I hired my friend, and that's why I don't like him, because he's unfeeling. He doesn't have an ounce of compassion or empathy in his whole body. See, because he's not the one with the ATP and the lactic acid in his muscles. He doesn't care. So when it's time for me to do one rep, I don't feel like doing another rep. I don't feel like doing any, to tell you the truth, most days. And he says, well, I don't care how you feel. This is what's right, and you're going to lift this weight. And I want to make you do it. And that's really important, because he's not burdened he's completely unburdened with my physical struggle, whether I'm on a treadmill and he's got that thing cranked up to an unrealistic speed, or I'm lifting this thing or doing this plank, or I'm doing a wall sit. His favorite thing to do with a wall sit is to take a few plates, put them on my lap, and then stand on them and stand there on those plates while I'm doing a wall sit and just watch me suffer. He just loves it. And I'll say, this really hurts, man. He says, oh, it's beautiful. I feel great. When you have mentors that are clear, right? That are clear, you have the ability to listen to them. That's one way to combat that. That's one way to bring in a third eye, an outside perspective to what you're doing. So that's a big deal. The other thing is journaling is really important, and planning is really important. In the heat of battle, if you've got a good playbook that you can go to, it really helps. I was interviewing, I mentioned Professor Fletcher, and he said he really walked through some interesting emotions. You got to check that interview when it drops on the Cashflow Academy podcast. And he says, when people don't have a plan, they get scared. Fear is when you don't know what you're doing. So if you have no plan, you'll absolutely experience fear because you have no way out of it. You don't know what to do. You have no plan. So when people don't know what to do, that's an opportunity for fear. He says, now, if you only have one plan and it doesn't work, that's where you'll be angry. And people who are angry have a plan in their head. When it doesn't go the way they want to, they lose their freaking minds. And that's the problem with anger, is when you have a plan, you have your stubborn plan. You got one plan. This is how it is. Dogmatic thinkers, right? This is how it goes. And I want it to go this way. And when it doesn't, anger is when things aren't going the way you want. They're not going according to plan. So having a playbook of several ways to get to heaven, right? Several paths to get there. And I say that metaphorically, not, I get hate mail whenever I say that. There's one way to heaven. I know, but what I'm saying is there's many paths to most destinations is what I'm trying to say. Give me a little break here. But it's important to have a playbook. And I when I was speaking with Dr. Fletcher, it was interesting. I thought about basketball. Is if you went out and tried to play a Division I game without a plan, you'd be scared to death because the score would be 50 to 10, out of the gate. And yet, if you didn't have a plan B, when things aren't going, if you don't know how to switch your offense around to take what the defense gives you, you got to take what the defense gives you. You don't get to necessarily impose your will. If they come out in the press, you got to run press offense. They come out in the zone, you have to run zone offense. They come out of man. The defense dictates your plan. The environment and the battle dictates your plan. So you don't get to force your will. You don't say, well, we're going to run our man offense against their press. Well, that means that the point guard's by himself, in a trap and no one to pass to. You get annihilated. So people that get angry easy, they get angry because they have a plan. They have one way to do something. And the environment says, nope, we're not doing your plan. And they just go crazy with anger. And you see this fear in our country. You see this anger in our country where either people don't know what to do and they're afraid because they don't see an answer, like AI coming on. They don't have a plan for AI. What are we going to do? Or, well, I had a plan to be a computer programmer. And within 9 months from today, they say all of the code will be written by AI. So I had this plan. I went to school. I got my master's degree in computer science, and now I'm worthless. Well, that's not fitting with my plan. That's frustration, right? And then you say, well, now I don't have a plan, and now you go to fear. So understanding this stuff and studying guys like Dr. Fletcher and another great one's Tally Sherritt that I've learned so much for. So shout out to Professor Sherritt. These psychological battles, I'll say this. You put a nickel in me. Good thing I have a podcast where I get to listen instead of speak. In COVID, Warren Buffett from afar, I know Robert very, very well. I've never met Warren Buffett. Boy, I'd love to. I'd probably just become a blubbering mess if I ever met him. He's blessed me so much. in my other office, in my home office, I have a sign on the wall, and it's a Buffett quote. He says, "I'll tell you how to become rich. Close the doors," as if to not let anyone know this secret. "I'll tell you how to become rich. Close the doors. Be greedy when people are fearful, and be fearful when people are greedy." That's it. That is it. That is a message of psychology, not of balance sheets, not of income statements. The way to get rich is to understand when there's fear and be able to manage that emotion and step aside and force yourself to be greedy. And then to recognize greed, not get swept up in that and be fearful instead. And I will tell you, when COVID hit, I was terrified mostly for my parents because we didn't know about what it is. Oh, hindsight, vaccines worked, vaccines didn't work, masks worked. Who the hell cares? But in the moment, we did see that the kids were doing fine with it. The younger people didn't seem to bother them, but the elderly, it was a big deal for the elderly, and my parents are elderly. So I was worried. I didn't have a plan for that. Didn't have a plan for them. Stock wise, I had a plan. Be greedy because everyone's fearful. Some of the best bargains I picked up in my entire life were 5 years ago. That's simple, because I knew for sure that it was time to be greedy when everyone else was fearful. I knew that so clearly and so calmly that it was very easy for me to buy stocks, even though I was, terrified for my parents. Do I visit them? Do I not visit them? Do I? And that was all driven by emotion. Oh, I'm not afraid of COVID. I'll be bold. Oh, I'm terrified of COVID. I won't, whatever it is. That was all emotion. But as far as stocks went, we were very clear. We were very clear with us and our students, by the way. I had a special session in March of 2020, and at over 10,000 people. Our system only held 10,000, and it broke. We broke that part of the internet, I guess, as they say. But I told every one of them, I says, look, I'm afraid for your parents just like mine and our health. We don't know where this will be. But there's one thing I can tell you: buy your ass off, man. You buy everything you can buy inside, because the bargains, it's such a sale. And that's the trouble. People don't know what a sale in the market looks like. Fear is your friend. Fear is your friend. And that's psychology. There's no balance sheet. You can see the balance sheet and the income statement, and you can see, one of the good metrics on this that I really like is price to tangible book. I'm actually spending $1, or I'm actually going to spend 50 cents for books that are worth $1 to me per share. I'm going to spend 50 cents for every dollar I pick up in that company. I mean, that may like going to your bank account and saying, Dell, let me buy everything you have 50 cents on the dollar. And think about that. That's clear. But in the environment of fear, the reason it's 50 cents on the dollar is because people are freaked out. And it's like A Wonderful Life, where Jimmy Stewart says, don't crawl the Potter. And the guy says, he'll give you 50 cents on the dollar. Better get some than none. You see it in A Wonderful Life, in that scene where there's the run on the bank. Potter's giving 50 cents on the dollar. I've got cash in my hand. Look, good news. I just sold my shares 50 cents on the dollar. I've got cash. That's the fear. And Jimmy Stewart is, saying, old George Bailey saying, I beg you not to do this. Now, you can't lose your head. Got to remain calm here, right? Can't go nuts. Potter will clean house here. He saw it. And so fear and greed. That's how you get rich. Fear and greed.
I was going to add to that of, that's probably some of the best advice I ever received about investing is be greedy when others are fearful, be fearful when others are greedy. And getting older in life, we've seen the Great Recession, we've seen the pandemic, and how that's rang true in each of these phases. And there will continue to be like that. And as you went back and talked about Jimmy Stewart, you can see it even went back then as well. My next question.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I want to plug Stockcast bonus. If a person's gone there or hasn't gone there, there's free stuff there. Actually, why would a person go and why would a person not go? Mostly it's because of how people feel. Logically it's a no-brainer. But, I feel lazy today. Oh, I feel this. Oh, that seems like too much work. Oh, this is just more fun to listen to the podcast. Whatever it is. They're going through life as taste buds instead of brain cells. You can't be a taste bud. You got to be a brain cell. And if you understand that in your head, the world actually makes a lot of sense. Oh, these are humans with their lizard brains being hit by dopamine, by AI that understands how to addict a lizard brain. It understands that we felt before we thought. A single-celled bacterium with its cilia or a flagellum, whatever, it doesn't have a brain. It just senses things. It senses a predator, and it starts really an algorithm of chemistry to make how does a jellyfish move if it can't think, right? It's just all chemical reactions of how it feels. And we have a lot of that lizard brain still left where we just, the AI knows it. They actually create algorithms to screw around with how you feel. And people don't scroll for any other reason than how it makes them feel. That's it. It's dopamine. And mastering that is so, and it's kind of fun because if you do master it, you can see everyone else in a trance, totally hypnotized. And you just sit around and watch everyone there, and you try to best you can to elevate yourself out of that and be a brain cell, not a taste bud. How do you solve these problems? Everyone says, well, you got to do it with love. Well, yeah, that'd be nice, but how we do it smarts. Let's start there. And let's try to react on what makes sense as opposed to how we just get so angry or so afraid. Fear and good. Fear, panic is the fear of losing what you have. Your son falls in the river and he's drowning. You're panicking because you're losing your son, right? Panic is oh my gosh, the house is on fire. Well, what do you care? Well, I'm losing what's mine, right? I'm property damage. I'm losing. So panic is the fear of losing what you've got. Well, some people drown because they can't swim. Other people drown because they panic. Mm. The other part of fear is greed is also fear. They're both fear. Panic is the fear of losing what you got. Greed is the fear of losing out on what you might get. So greed's just fearful. People who are greedy are so afraid not to have what could be theirs. They're so afraid of that dollar that might not get in their pocket. There's a dollar that could be had. I need that dollar. I need to have that dollar. They're so afraid in negotiation for a win-win because they'll feel like, well, gee, that's another dollar I'm not getting. I need every dollar. And they feel incredible dopamine when they negotiate to where they are a winner and another person's losing. They feel victorious with it. And actually they've lost. They've lost their ethics. They've lost a friend. They've lost a win-win. They've lost a long-term relationship. So they're both just fear-based. Panic is the fear of losing what you got. That's when the market crashes. Greed is the fear of missing out. That's when it becomes a bubble.
Very good. I love those definitions. I love digging into that. Now, last question. This is more of an action-based question because we talk about action all the time, how important action is. So if someone wants to start mastering the mindset of a disciplined investor, what's one simple action they can take this week?
Well, I had a friend named Marshall who once said this. He said, what you focus on expands. So the first thing is you have a currency of money. You have a bank account. And so you spend money and you pay fees, right? Well, if you look at what your life's made up of, before coins were invented, before wealth was invented, when we're just out there trying to stab a fish with a spear and eat, what you really pay in your life is your life is made of time and attention. So it's interesting. Save time, spend time, pay attention. Isn't that interesting? We use the same words to describe our attention and our time as we do our money. I think I'll invest some time here. Oh, that was a waste of time. That's a waste. Oh, I'm going to invest some money. That's a waste of money. Oh, I'm going to pay attention. Oh, I'm going to pay the tuition. I'm going to pay the price. Isn't that interesting? The same words with attention. So the very first thing a person can do is listen to Thales of Miletus, know thyself, and begin to pay attention and focus a little bit on self away from the world. What that will do, think of AI. People think AI is the problem, and they miss it because they're not knowing themselves. Oh my gosh, AI is going to take all the jobs. Yeah, it is. It's going to take a lot of them. It's going to take a lot of them. We'll be in 2 years, the world will be drastically different. My job is to separate what we talk about from the noise because the world is changing. That's an interesting thing. All the jobs are going away. So there's a big problem with AI. No, there isn't. See, that's a person that's focused on the world. A person that knows themselves knows what the real problem is. Oh, I don't know how to invest. AI can't own things. It can't own stocks. Look, either you compete against AI, and a new word you'll hear, a new phrase you'll hear is called comparative advantage. That's the new word. Remember that one. I'm going to compare the advantage of having a machine do something to a human, because all it is cost now. We can build a machine that could, if I said $100 million prize to the person that builds a robot that can plumb a house. We have bipedal humanoid robots that have fingers that can pick up an egg, crack it, scramble it, not break it in the wrong way. It's far superior. They can live, the Amazon robots, the humanoid robots they're testing, they pick up 40 kilograms like it's nothing. 40 kilograms, that's a lot of weight. They pick it up like it's nothing. So someone says, oh, the problem is AI. No, it isn't. That's external. Know yourself. Well, the problem is I don't know how to invest. I didn't buy all the stocks. I didn't go to stockcastbonus.com over the past who knows how long. I didn't do it. I didn't learn how to invest. See, that's when you understand yourself. Well, the problem isn't with AI. The problem is here. And the beautiful thing about this locus of control internally, that view, is I can always change me. Can't change the world. I can always change me. I can always adapt. And that's psychology. Nothing we've talked about in that segment has to do with income statements and balance sheets. It has to do with how I see the world. So there's not a more important topic than mindset. And what can people do right now? Go to stockcastbonus.com and get going and start learning how to buy things and learn how to buy them with leverage, and turn off Dave Ramsey because he has no idea what he's talking about. No debt, no leverage. That's your only chance now. If you want to own, Del, what's going to happen when people realize that now the future in the rat race is going to be run by automated rats that you can't compete with? You can't even be a good rat in a rat race anymore because they got artificial ones that are stronger, better, smarter, and quicker than you.
True.
So now that there's no rat race and the rat race disappearing, people will flock to ownership. I think we're going to have the biggest boom of stock market we've ever seen over the next 10 years. I've never predicted that in my whole career. Tom Wilwright heard me say that. He says, Andy, I've never heard you predict a boom in your whole life. You're always worried about the risk. Of course I am. But when people are fearful and they are afraid, it's time to own shares because there's a limited amount in the float, Dell. Limited amount of shares out there to buy. Do you know that Salesforce fired 4,000 people? And on the same day, they got approved for $50 billion in buyback. So Salesforce is getting rid of humans and gaining more shares of their company back. They only own 3% of total shares right now as restricted shares. This $50 billion approval they've gotten to buy back, they'll now own 25% of their shares. That means only 75% is in the float. Well, 83% of shares, they're going to have to buy some from institutions because 83% of it's held by institutions like Fidelity and that. Do you think they want to give up those shares easily? When the only way to have wealth from labor now is to own the labor rather than to do the labor, there's only so many shares. And as more and more companies like Microsoft are laying off people, Oracle's laying off people, Salesforce is laying off people, because within a year, anyone with a degree in computer science, you'll have the best computer scientist in your pocket and the best mathematician in a year. General AI is 3 years away. That's what they call the San Francisco consensus. All the Silicon Valley guys, whether you're talking to the guy who runs Claude, you're talking to what's his name, Amodai, who runs Claude, whether you talk to the guy at Google Brain, just got the Nobel Prize, quit because he's scared of what AI is doing.
Did you
talk
really?
to the OpenAI people. All these people say, here's the timeline. Now is LLM, artificial intelligence, large language model. Second is agents. That's where we're at now, where we're programming these to do little tasks, maybe not all your tasks, but parts of them, agents. Then we'll get in 3 years to general AI, which basically in your cell phone, you have the best physicist, the best mathematician, the best programmer, the best architect, the best accountant, the smartest in the world in your pocket. And it thinks like you do. It can make decisions. It has, the ability to really think like a human. And then 6 years out, they say they're on pace for 6 years, is artificial super intelligence, artificial super general intelligence. That's the intelligence that's now smarter, not the general intelligence where we finally found a human type intelligence. Super intelligence is smarter than the sum of humans, In other words, it's going to solve problems that we've never even thought about before. And it's going to do things we haven't even contemplated. Think of a 3-year-old sitting on Einstein's lap. That's who we are. And I don't know of any scenario where the less intelligent organism is in charge of the more intelligent. I've never seen elephants running people before, even though elephants are smart and they never forget. I don't see people at the command of a gorilla anymore. I don't see people saying, oh, here's a bacteria, I'm going to do what this bacteria wants. Ownership is the last thing that AI cannot do that a human can do. They're not allowed to own things. We are. So the gold rush to the float, the shares that are still available, I'll probably never sell another share of stock. So the psychology of understanding that the problem's not external, the problem is, I don't know how to invest, someone says. Once they realize there's a solution right there, own the technology, buy your ass off, buy your shares where you can get them. Pretty simple. What stops you from doing that? Emotions. Oh, I'm afraid of this, or I'm unknown, and I don't know. Another thing to fight fear is fear usually grows out of ignorance. If you look at the country, we're fearful of each other because we're ignorant, because we're stupid. It's ignorance. And so the key to that is education, and not in school and not on your phone. It's from mom and dad. That's how that should have happened. But we got to have things. So we're going to go to work instead of raise kids. It's interesting stuff. So don't get me going. Psychology, nothing more important. We got to know ourselves. We got to know ourselves and why we're behaving this way. Study it, focus on it, have mentors, get educated, practice. All these things help.
There we go. I love that, Andy. What a great way to end the show. Mindset, discipline, psychology, know thyself. These are all real drivers of success in the stock market. Gems. And most people never take time to master them. So a big thank you to Andy Tanner for breaking this down so clearly. Now, listener, if you want to start building both the confidence and the system to become a disciplined investor, go to stockcastbonus.com. The tools are there. The next move is yours. And if this episode gave you any value, do me a favor, like, subscribe, share it with someone who's serious about growing their wealth the right way. You're not here by accident. You're building something that most people won't. So stay smart, stay invested, and we'll see you next time.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.